Hi, my name is Tim Chapman, and welcome to part 1 of my special project, which focuses on the following question. In what ways can you stage online activity? In this case, I'm referring mainly to the world of social media, and in particular, Facebook. Facebook fascinates me. Not only do I use it every single day, but I believe it's changing how we live our lives, from the way we communicate, to the way we treat people, to how we perceive ourselves, and indeed the world around us. As a theatre maker, I think that it's a rich subject to respond to, and indeed over the last few years I've enjoyed watching a number of plays and productions that have explored this subject in various different ways. And since then, I've been wanting to create a piece of my own, where I can put the environment of social media on stage. What I'm specifically aiming to do with this project through both this video essay and the written critical reflection is to figure out how best I can do this by practically testing out different subjects in relation to social media that I am interested in, and to hopefully generate helpful methods and themes that I can refer back to when devising a production in the future. This video essay looks at the devising workshops that I ran, where participants joined me in exploring this vast topic. So, let's get going. After gathering various participants to help out, the subject for my first workshop was the online profile. I wanted to explore how a person exists online. I split the participants into 2 groups and gave each group a task to devise a 3 to 5 minute piece that creatively responded to this term, the online profile. Each group's piece also had to be influenced by one of the satirical images available to them. The reason for doing this is because these images, to a certain extent, also achieve what I'm trying to do, which is to creatively respond to this online world. Except they do this through cartoons and photography, rather than through theatrical form. For instance, this image depicts Facebook as a person that eats away at their time. But what I wanted these images to do was simply make my groups think outside the box with their devising. And they also had to incorporate at least one electronic device into the performance. The reason for this last rule was because I wanted them to consider the staging possibilities of a piece about social media. This is where I draw inspiration from theatre company 1927's Golem, which is a play about a man and his robot assistant, or as the robots are referred to, his golem, basically meaning a creature created to assist its master. The golem updates itself throughout the performance to become smaller, more promotional, and more fashionable to society, much like a mobile phone, which is how I think the play relates greatly to this topic that I'm studying. But the point I want to draw attention to is this. During the performance, whilst the character of the man performed physically on stage, the golem, on the other hand, was projected as an animation onto a wall. The man would perform and interact with the projection, creating an intermedial performance of sorts. Essentially, they combined the physical with the digital, much like our interaction with our mobile phones, or indeed any other electronic device that we often use to access social media. In my workshops, I wanted the performances not just to replicate what Golem could do, but experiment with these staging ideas by incorporating the presence of electronic devices nonetheless. With that being said, let's have a look at what Group 1 created in response to the term profile, using this image. They performed using Facebook Live, which is when you can film and live stream yourself to all your Facebook friends. The 2 performers, Katie and Amy, were filmed, and those watching the live stream through a laptop or their phone would see their video captioned, "Here is our experiment, please tell us what to do." They were inviting online viewers to comment with instructions for them, and they acted in response to these comments. One participant in the group filmed the action and another participant read out the comments, some of which included dance, form the shape of a pineapple, balance chairs upside down on the floor, your dance wasn't silly enough, play musical chairs, tickle each other until someone cries. This went on for approximately 3 minutes until the live stream ended, which signalled the end of the performance. The audience members who were in the room where the action was taking place also had to watch the videos on iPads and laptops, just like the online audience. although they would often look up and watch the action as well. The performance bore the resemblance to the image through the use of Facebook providing a different perspective on life. What I liked about this piece also was that if you were to draw from it any commentaries on the word profile, to me, because the profile in question is only acting in response to what the viewers wanted, it was as if it was suggesting that the profile is actually what other people want it to be, rather than what the user wants it to be. When they restaged it again, but this time they deliberately disobeyed the viewer's commands, in return they lost audience members. In a way, the profile was neglected because it didn't correspond to what the audience wanted, unsurprisingly. Before I develop this idea further, let's look also at what the second group came up with, responding to the term profile alongside this image.
I am looking for a girl. She should have pretty eyes. A smile.
This piece involved the male members of the group sitting with their backs to the audience with laptops, forming a separate audience themselves, and they were looking for the ideal partner. The three female performers were stood in front of them. The man, Andrew, would read out the qualities that he's searching for. What this did was filter the number of girl contestants on stage down from 3 to 1, as if it was a competition.
Interest should be music.
Then, when the qualities became more specific,
She could be a smoker. A drinker, definitely a drinker. She should hate getting caught in the rain. She should like pina coladas.
the woman left standing was tasked with holding various objects corresponding to these demands. Then, when she was told that she must have a good posture, the other girls helped her pose properly.
Suck it in more. Stay like that.
Big.
Push it out. Push it out.
Bigger.
Oh, just stick it. Like, stick it out.
At this point, the contestant was struggling to carry everything and walk at the same time, when she eventually found a match on her phone.
But you have to stay like that. That's the free one. I'm gonna go meet him now.
To be honest, this performance didn't really bear much resemblance to the image I gave them. But what I did notice was that it came across as very sexist, objectifying, and it made me rethink how, when you are on Facebook, and even other dating sites, you try and quantify interests. It made me wonder if Facebook and dating sites are tailored more to the male gaze and male interests also. However, when I asked them to restage the piece through the female gaze, the piece was equally as objectifying.
Go to the gym.
Yes.
We'll pay for my meal.
Yeah.
Sensitive.
But with a sizable dick.
Both of these pieces that responded creatively to the term profile bore one common theme, and that is the self-editing that is often carried out on your online self. And it's true. You can edit images of yourself at the click of a button on all these social media sites, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. But crucially, it's self-editing for the sake of other people, other viewers, that the performances both picked up on. If you were a character who was meant to be represented online, for instance, in future shows, maybe they could be a character who changes in appearance all the time for the sake of others. Self-editing is a key theme to staging online activity, I think. It's a theme that I will return to later on in this video and in the critical reflection. In addition to this, however, what the workshop also made me take into consideration with a topic like social media is, where is the stage? You could absolutely say that all you need is the screen, presenting the Facebook homepage, and that would be a stage enough for loads to perform on. When I asked Group 1 to redo their piece, we as the physical audience members were asked to leave the room and watch Amy and Katie only through our iPhones or laptops. In comparison to the experience we had when we were in the room first time, I think the concentration was better second time round. We didn't have the distraction of Amy and Katie in the room, and we also didn't notice the video lag that comes from a live transmission of their actions either, which was the issue with their first performance. I think that the more accepting you can become of the screen being a stage on which you can perform, then the more obvious it seems that this would be a clear way to stage online activity. This is where social media resides. It's the basis for which digital performance can happen. I bore this in mind for the following workshops, in which most performances created from this point onwards had to involve an electronic device of some sort. And with that in mind, let's move on to the next workshop. I've been fascinated by how Facebook in particular has shaped how its users consume news of all different types. I go on Facebook every day, and as I'm scrolling down my newsfeed, I could come across an article addressing a serious and current subject, and directly underneath that article is something like this. After briefly discussing the topic, I gave the group the task to create a piece responding to the term news, using this image that I had given them, which was in reference to the Facebook filter that you could apply to your profile picture to show support for Paris after the terror attacks on the 13th of November 2015. For the first part of this workshop, I made it compulsory that I would experience this performance through my phone. Here's what they came up with.
The fuck is she doing? Okay, so now it's sports.
Who's that?
So they're playing with grass.
Grass,
They're-
environment.
yeah.
We're talking about how much they love the environment.
Yeah, well, I think so. But it's getting... They're having a great time. It's all being filmed. Hello.
Then I was shown footage that depicted the situation from the point of view of the people who were outside. The first set of videos made me laugh, and I didn't really take it seriously. I laughed along with the participants who had filmed it, but on seeing the second set of videos,
You don't realise how fragile someone is, like
Mixture of conditions and so many tablets. Like, the tablets are part of the problem.
I felt bad for laughing.
sort of had the life sucked out of her for the last couple of years, and it's been on and off.
And I started to care a lot more for the story that was really being told. This was because it was a very personal story.
Extremely, extremely, extremely low. It's just not very. It's not very nice to see. It's not like having the same person around when she gets as low as she does.
The dancing that I originally thought was funny simply became irrelevant in the face of something more significant to the performance, a much more personal story. What they had drawn from this topic of news and the image, and what they wanted to respond to, was how social media, and admittedly media in general, can miscommunicate a story, and that the narrative that we see isn't necessarily the whole narrative in itself. On Facebook, arguments were started over just how we show our respect for the Paris terror attacks through the filters, with almost no discussion or attention paid to the horror of what France had gone through, which seems to be the more important topic of focus. This piece was a great response to how these topics can be lost and strewn when mediated through something like social media, and as a result we forget the bigger picture. When I asked them to remake their performance without using the phone as a stage, again, this was to make them rethink the staging possibilities, the piece they made instead was just as interesting. Now, as an audience member, I was sat in front of these two performers here, except I was made to wear headphones, meaning that I couldn't hear what they were saying. It looked like the two people were in a relationship, and that what they were discussing was something very personal, and private. Then I was blindfolded, and instead I simply listened to the two participants sitting in the same spaces.
1 year ago today was my first taste of runny meat chicken.
Watches these impressive kid bakers make desserts that are like your favourite comfort food.
Happy birthday, pal! Here's an adorable photo of you and Hannah.
This leopard kills a baboon, but when she discovers its baby, everything changes.
And I realised that their dialogue was made up of status updates and adverts. They were reading off of their Facebook news feeds. It didn't sound like they were talking to each other. Rather, it sounded like they were talking at each other. It turns out that this is the dialogue that the participants were speaking when I was watching them the first time round, as well. Once again, the theme of miscommunication was key to this, except unlike the other performance, which turned out to be far more meaningful and emotionally significant than I originally thought, the result with this one was exactly the opposite, and the truth turned out to be a lot shallower. Miscommunication, not just of news but of any kind of narrative, seemed to be a key theme in the world of social media. And this was the main point to remember from my second workshop. Let's have a look at my final workshop. I began this session talking with the group about friends who are real and friends who are fake. But essentially, what I was really interested in was depicting friends of the online world and exploring the difference between them and friends outside of that world. The task I gave them this time was to stage the formation, activity, and breakup of a friendship. Now, despite the things I've previously said about where the stage lies in the topic of social media, and addressing how useful and clear it would be to have the screen as such a stage, this group ultimately challenged this by creating a physical space representing the online world. I wouldn't say that the staging of the online world necessarily needs digital devices to exist. For instance, if you look at Jennifer Haley's The Nether, one of my favourite plays, the online world was essentially represented using a beautiful green forest, because the users could create their own environment. And to one of the users, this forest was their ideal location on Earth, and this made complete sense to the audience. Additionally, in Millie Thomas's play Clickbait, when the main character was interacting with her online fans and supporters, they simply ran into her bedroom, which was the basis of the set for the majority of the play. When I look back to the first workshop, where viewing performances online seemed like the best way to experience social media on stage, the third workshop proved that it is possible to physicalize this online environment in a room in an interesting and engaging way, without the extensive use of electronic devices. So, here's what my group did. They taped out this octagonal shape where the inside of the shape was split into 3 parts. The lower section of the shape was where the characters stood just for friendships that existed in the online world, whereas the upper section was for friendships that existed only in the outside world. The centerpiece, where Andrew and Vicky are sitting, represented a friendship that existed in both these capacities. Throughout this performance, we saw Andrew and Vicky each bring along a friend for when they met up in real life. When we saw this newfound companionship between new friends Eleanor and Georgia begin to manifest online, they take a photo. This is when I needed to start looking at my phone, as Georgia and Eleanor now stood in the online section and began commenting on the photo that they had just taken.
Lads.
Georgia, I asked you not to post this. But everyone's in it. I look like shit.
Eleanor revealed how she wasn't happy with the photo and didn't want it online. This kicked off an argument with Georgia,
Why are you not
which eventually led to them leaving the space.
unfriend?
Only not being able to penetrate it again. whereas Andrew and Vicky could. As far as the subject of Facebook friends went, Vicky's additional comments also proved interesting.
You can't see that as well. So like this Venn diagram could be like an elaborate set, so you can have even more boxes. Like when I was saying about like acquaintances, family, they're all categorised as friends, but this is the friend bubble, but like you're not really friends, you're like some
different categories underneath that bubble.
So
It was at this point that I realised that my approach towards this topic of online friends, just using the two categories of real and fake, was far too simple. There are far more categories that we shovel users into, all under the umbrella term of friend, at least for Facebook's case, anyway. Imagine a theatrical piece consisting of a whole room with different sections, like this, representing different categories that we put people into on Facebook, or indeed other social media sites. Friends, followers, acquaintances, family members, work colleagues, there are simply more categories than the term fake and real in this scenario. So, that concludes the workshop phase of my project. The themes and ideas that they generated, ideas that I can take forward into future work, are these things. The staging possibilities. It is possible to have audience engagement of a piece through both the stage and a phone or a laptop. The concept of self-editing, the concept of miscommunication, and the categorization of people. If I was to create a piece about or in response to social media, I would bear these themes in mind. But there's something about these themes that complicate my question of staging online activity somehow. And it's this. Are these themes exclusive to the world of social media? No, they're not. After all, we change the way we look and act for different groups of people all the time. We self-edit in real life. And we absolutely categorise and treat people differently, sometimes depending on the different groups we are in. Miscommunication is definitely not a concept that was born from the online world. It certainly aggravated it. But media in general is responsible for this. And the action of sharing stories physically with different people is also responsible for this. Although these workshops generated these themes, they don't need the platform of social media to exist. They are independent themes in their own right. They belong in the real world too. What I've found is these themes have far more to say about how we are as people in everyday life, rather than what they specifically have to say about social media. So what does this mean for my question then? Perhaps by creating work about social media and the matters that automatically generate from it, is also to inevitably and ultimately create work about real life matters too. But what about all these productions I've referenced? Productions that I've always thought have made social media their main subject. Am I right in thinking this? Or do they address something greater than that? I'm going to continue to explore these questions further in part 2, my written critical reflection. But to finish this video, I'm going to leave you with the last few moments of an interview I conducted with Max Lindsay, director of the play Girls Like That, where he shared his thoughts on the subject of putting social media on stage. Would you say that Girls Like That was about more than just the dangers of social media? Or would you say that was the entirety of the main thing?
Massively more than just social media.
Yeah?
Just trying to do a piece just about, the dangers of social media, it just gets really boring really quick. You've got to have something deeper than just that. You've got to find that story, and then dig from there.
Thanks for watching.